The passage suggests that Snyder et al. Believed that if the older theory concerning caffeine's effects were correct, which of the following would have to be the case? This is a reference to the second paragraph. The second paragraph starts by telling us about the older theory or the older perception about caffeine's effects. It says, for many years, caffeine's effects have been attributed to its inhibition of the production of phosphodiesterase, an enzyme that breaks down the chemical called cyclic AMP. A number of neurotransmitters exert their effects by first increasing cyclic AMP concentrations in target neurons. Therefore, prolonged periods at the elevated concentrations, as might be brought about by a phosphodiesterase inhibitor, could lead to a great amount of neuron firing and consequently to behavioral stimulation. These last two statements, they give us the reference to at least two of the given statements in the question. But Snyder et al. Point out that the caffeine concentrations needed to inhibit the production of phosphodiesterase in the brain are much higher than those that produce stimulation. Moreover, other compounds that block phosphodiesterase's activity are not stimulants. Now we see that, but Snyder et al. Point out, this is where Snyder and his group, they digressed or they differed in opinion with from the older older theory about the effects of caffeine, which is given here. The points or the postulates of the older theory are in these first three lines. The last two lines, they say why Snyder and his group believe these effects or this theory to be incorrect. So this is somewhat inferential because it says if the older theory were correct, then what would be the case? So what we need to do is we need to invert this argument. These two statements, the points in these, the aspects in these must be inverted. Let's look at the given statements. One says all neurotransmitters would increase the short-term concentration of cyclic AMP in target neurons. Now, while this is closed because this is a postulate from the older theory, a number of neurotransmitters exert their effects by first increasing cyclic AMP concentration in target neurons. So it could be argued that these neurotransmitters mentioned here would increase the short-term concentration of cyclic AMP in target neurons. But there is a generalization in the word all neurotransmitters. That's what one says. But here, the passage tells us about a number of neurotransmitters, a number, whatever number that may be a very high number. It may mean most of the neurotransmitters, still does not mean all neurotransmitters. So if this were true, we still cannot say that all neurotransmitters would actually do this. A number of neurotransmitters, yes. All neurotransmitters, most probably no. So one is distorted. It should not be part of our answer. Statement 2 says, substances other than caffeine that inhibit the production of phosphodiesterase would be stimulants. Yes, absolutely true. This we can infer from the last statement. Moreover, other compounds that block phosphodiesterase activity are not stimulants. Now, this does say that these substances other than caffeine are not stimulants. This is where Snyder and his group differs from the original theory or the older theory. But if the older theory were true, then this would be negated, which means double negative, the not would be removed. Other compounds or substances other than caffeine that block phosphodiesterase or that block phosphodiesterase's activity would be considered stimulants. And hence, that's exactly what 2 says. Substances other than caffeine, the ones that inhibit the production of phosphodiesterase, would be considered stimulants. Hence, this is a valid statement. So we can qualify 2, it should be part of our answer. 3 says all concentration levels of caffeine that are high enough to produce stimulation would also inhibit the production of phosphodiesterase. This is also true. We can see this from the second last statement here. But Snyder et al. Point out that the caffeine concentrations needed to inhibit the production of phosphodiesterase in the brain are much higher than those that produce stimulation. So this is also where Snyder and his group differ from the original theory or the older theory, stating that the caffeine concentrations needed to inhibit the production of phosphodiesterase in the brain are much higher than those that produce stimulation. So just producing stimulation is not enough because there would not be inhibition of the production of phosphodiesterase. Hence, it is not probable that caffeine actually causes stimulation by inhibiting the production of phosphodiesterase. As in, different concentrations would be required, much higher concentrations would be required to inhibit the production of phosphodiesterase than to just produce stimulation, which means that production of stimulation through inhibition of phosphodiesterase is an incorrect notion. But if this were inverted, then we would have that this particular aspect or this particular argument would be turned true, in which case we see that all concentrations, any concentrations of the levels of caffeine, which would be high enough to produce stimulation, would also inhibit the production of phosphodiesterase, because then this much higher than would be negated and would be obviated. So the same concentrations would do both. They would produce stimulation and also inhibit the production of phosphodiesterase, or rather, as the passage tells us, they would produce stimulation by inhibiting the production of phosphodiesterase. So this last statement would also be obviated, and that is exactly what we would get if such a thing were to happen. If the second last statement were to be obviated, we would get exactly the argument that is made in 3. So 3 also can be qualified. It should be part of our answer, and that means the correct answer is option C, which says 2 and 3 only.